how dumb can anyone be to steal a first folio, because it is the most documented book in the world.
With the chance of a high-profile sale falling apart, Scott made a series of phone calls to America in a bid to convince the specialists his Cuban Folio wasn't Durham's stolen copy. However, these conversations would help detectives pinpoint just where in the world the elusive Raymond Scott was.
Mr. Scott called Richard Kukta one morning, and Richard noted the telephone number on his caller ID, immediately called me with that number, and I conveyed that number to Michael Callan, and that's really how the whole case began to come together.
As a result of them, we made inquiries immediately over here in Durham and quickly identified that Raymond Scott was at Washington, Tyne and Weir, not Washington, USA. They thought initially they were dealing with obviously an international art thief, and they didn't really know that he was a UK resident living 10 miles away from the scene of the theft, because of the details that he'd given to Richard Kukta.
The image of a wealthy, eccentric Englishman living a life of luxury was somewhat removed from the more modest reality.
Within 2 or 3 hours from being contacted, we had officers outside Raymond Scott's house. He was there pruning his roses, and we then went to arrest him, and we were quite certain it was the Raymond Scott who'd been the man in the Folio library.
As Scott was booked in by detectives for questioning, a second police team searched his home, looking for other rare works taken during the 1998 theft at Durham University.
They have reasonable suspicion to believe that you've been involved in this theft, which is why you've been arrested and loaded with police.
No missing literature was found, but the search did provide police with a valuable insight into just who the mysterious Mr. Scott really was. Durham Police Headquarters, and the clues to Scott's flamboyant lifestyle are gathered in a small, unlit room.
This is all the property that we seized from Mr. Scott's home address. When we went through the door, we weren't expecting to be dealing with Raymond Scott as the person who he is.
I'm almost 52 years of age next year on the 12th of February, Aquarius, the water carrier.
When we locked him up on the night, he was saying, you know, I only drink the best champagne and I only drink after 6 o'clock. That was the type of individual we were dealing with.
I wouldn't say that I'm a wine snob, but I can tell the difference between a good bottle and an indifferent bottle.
He seemed to be an extrovert and liked the best things in life.
The freshness of the cigars that I got in Cuba were of a different league, a different class.
He would go to shops and buy a pair of trunks for £100, and I don't buy trunks for £100.
Shall I put it this way? I would rather have one item of quality than 100 items that were indifferent.
There was about 1,300 odd books in his house. A lot of the books looked as though they'd never been even read.
It is possible to live a champagne lifestyle on a lager budget, if you're careful, you know.
While detectives were surprised at the contents of Scott's house, his choice of car seemed to suggest even cannier budgeting skills.
This is the Ferrari that was parked outside of Raymond Scott's house when we arrested him. This is the kind of thing that the man portrays to be. This is the car that his neighbours say that he goes out in his pyjamas and his dressing gown and irons the seats.
It was Scott's extravagant lifestyle that had aroused suspicions.
He claims that his mum's the owner and driver of the vehicle, but clearly it's his. How many people have cars like this? This is a man who lives on benefits. The man lives in a 3-bedroom semi with his 80-odd-year-old mum, and this is the sort of thing that he's driving and using.
The supercar driving playboy with a taste of the high life was in fact a jobless Geordie living at home with mum.
although I still, at the moment, am living domiciled in my mother's house, there's nothing false or faux or plastic about me. This is who I am.
He's an eccentric character. This is a man who thinks he's James Bond.
However, Scott's cool persona would start to be shaken and stirred as detectives questioned him about the stolen folio.
What's your full name, please?
Raymond Riggett Scott.
Date of birth, Raymond?
12th of the 2nd, 1957.
The very first time that he was interviewed, he didn't really say a lot, and he relied a great deal upon letters that had been recovered from his house.
In these letters seized by police, Scott had written a detailed account of exactly where and when he claimed to have acquired the book.
Where did you first come across it?
In Cuba. The thing is this, you already have the documents in which I explain from Alpha to Omega my association with the Cuban folio.
We don't know what's contained in that letter, so we need to discuss it with you.
Well, you'll just have to be a patient child, like waiting for Christmas, won't you?
With Scott revealing little else in his interview, these letters were all detectives had to go on.
In the letters, he was saying that from the middle of May 2008, he'd been in Cuba. It's a place that he'd been to many times, he'd holidayed there. And during the course of his visits, he'd met two people, Heidi Garcia Rios and Denny Moreno Leon.
It's against a backdrop of Havana's crumbling facades and battered 50s cars that the Cuban folio story begins, according to Raymond Scott. And like many of Shakespeare's works, this particular tale starts with romance.
Well, she was dancing at the Parisian nightclub, and I saw her. I was staying in the presidential suite at the Hotel Nacional de Cuba in late October, early November of 2007. And I saw her dancing. I suppose it's an old hackneyed cliche, but I suppose it was love at first sight. And our eyes sort of met, and I waited about 20 minutes, and then I met Señorita Heidi Garcia Rios, and life's never been the same since.
What began as a holiday fling with a 21-year-old dancer would develop into a full-blown love affair, leading Scott to propose marriage. His subsequent engagement to Rios would result in him making more interesting Cuban connections, notably Denny Leon.
He used to be a personal bodyguard to Fidel Castro. He is a big guy, an affable guy. I call him a big Cuban teddy bear. Denny himself is a white Cuban of pure European descent. The majority of his ancestors came from Galicia in northwestern Spain. And always in his family, they had had this book which they referred to as El Libro Viejo en Inglés, the Old English book.
The book had been in Denny's family in Cuba for, I think he said about 100 years.
And when I saw it, I wasn't particularly impressed. To look, for a start, it's a disbound copy. It has no front and back covers.
On the 6th of June, he says that the three of them went to the National Library in Havana,
La Biblioteca Nacional de Cuba,
and researched the book that they had in their possession.
And there we found out, that's Heidi, me and Denny, about the first folio Shakespeare. And it started to look interesting.
Scott's backstory was certainly rich in colourful detail. However, one very significant part of his alibi wasn't adding up.